Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, I will be taking you through step by step my 2000 point super heavy tank army list that I will be taking to a tournament. Every guard player loves a big old tank, and so I thought it was about time that we unleashed the chunky boys onto the meta. Well, I say that I thought it was about time, but that's not entirely true. Oh, I know, there goes Mordian Glory lying to us again, running around with his pants on fire. I know, lambast me. But in reality, it was actually the Mordian Glory community who picked this list entirely unit by unit. You see, as a result of me going to more tournaments, I've decided that I'm going to start letting the community pick some of the lists that I take, and we build these lists during the live streams. So if you like the idea of sending me to a tournament with a particular unit or with a very wacky combination or list theme in mind, then please consider joining one of the live streams, checking it out, and doing what you can to either help or hinder me on my tournament journey. But with all of that said, now let us lift up the rock, have a good look underneath, and dive right into this army list. Now it seems only right to start off with the big boys, and where else would we begin but with the El Clasico, the timeless super heavy, the iconic big tank of the guard. I am, of course, talking about the BANEBLADE, ready to unleash 11 barrels of hell. Armed with its impressive BANEBLADE cannon, coaxial autocannon, a hull-mounted demolisher cannon, 4 las cannons, and 5 twin heavy bolters, and let's not forget the cheeky heavy stubber as well. The BANEBLADE is a fantastic take-all-comers unit. It's not the most powerful guard super heavy you can get, but it can serve well in most battlefield scenarios. Its weapons are never going to be the most effective against, say, infantry or the most effective against tanks, but it can reliably be thrown into any kind of foe, and it will still do a lot of damage. It is the jack of all trades, master of none, which is a fairly strange way of describing a super heavy tank, but rest assured, I've used BANEBLADEs for many years now, and overall, they always tend to do a good job on the battlefield if they are given the opportunity to do so. Obviously, in previous editions, BANEBLADEs were getting picked up like they weren't even there, but whenever they've had a chance to shine, they've never let me down. And looking at the profile of this beast now with its toughness 13, I think that it does have the durability to survive the initial punch, especially if I end up going second and I have to weather a bit of a enemy alpha strike, and it should have the firepower to punish anyone that doesn't manage to destroy it. Now, speaking of surviving enemy alpha strikes, this BANEBLADE actually also has a specific function in this list and within the tournament scene that I'm going to. You see, I'm going to a local event, and it's one at a store called Just Play. It's in Liverpool, and they run monthly RTT tournaments. I highly recommend that you go to them. They're always really well run, and if you've watched it in my after action tournament reports, you'll actually notice that I've been to a few of them, and I really do rate them. Now, the thing about the Just Play events is they aren't quite as terrain heavy. They have enough, and there's always plenty of opportunities to hide your army, but they make a special effort that the boards aren't so crammed with terrain that you can't physically move around these big models like BANEBLADEs. There's always ways for your super heavies, for your knights and stuff like that to be able to get around the battlefield. So because of that, it does make the BANEBLADE viable. He's not going to get stuck on my deployment zone the whole time, but also his rolling fortress ability, where he gives cover to people that are like around him and are hidden by him, will be very, very helpful, because it means that I can roll him onto an objective, bring some troops up behind him, and the troops will get the benefit of cover, and they don't need to worry so much about maybe going on an objective that is a little bit exposed. So not only is he going to be performing just general combat duties, but he's also going to help me play to the tournament and play to the terrain. Now, if the Baneblade is intended as a multi-role unit within this list, the same cannot be said for our next big boy. I am, of course, talking about the mighty Shadow Sword. This tank, which is definitely helping me compensate for something, is taken for one reason and one reason only: to do damage to the enemy, to drive them before me, to hear the lamentation of their units, to break them. The Shadow Sword has one of, if not the most powerful weapons that you are likely to see in a standard game of 40k. The Volcano Cannon wounds pretty much any unit in the game on 2s. It's AP -5, it does a flat damage 12. If you shoot it against monsters or vehicles, it gets devastating wounds, which, considering it doesn't ignore invulnerable saves, is actually a very, very nice ability for it to have when you come across someone who's rolling them 4-up invuns and is getting hot with them. But it's not just got the big penis cannon, it's also equipped with 5 twin heavy bolters and 4 las cannons, giving it more than enough volume of fire to be able to handle a lot of other types of enemy units. Those bolters will scythe down infantry, and those las cannons, well, if for some reason I'm encountering an enemy that really doesn't just want to roll over and die to the volcano cannon, they should be able to help finish it off. But my prediction is that the Shadow Sword will actually be splitting fire fairly regularly. I feel like the bolters and las cannons will go into one enemy target, and between the natural strength and AP of the las cannons and the full rerolls to wound from the twin heavy bolters, that should allow me to take down any kind of enemy unit. Even if it's a vehicle, the reroll wounds should be okay. And then the main gun will go into another unit and destroy that. Basically, I've taken this tank to do damage. I've taken it to just focus on killing the enemy. And I'm kind of hoping that people are going to underestimate it, because everyone knows what a Baneblade does. Everyone understands that it's a big tank, and most people have faced off against one before. In my experience, in my more local meta, in this tournament scene that I'm fairly familiar with now at Just Play, I don't think I've ever seen anyone else take a Shadow Sword. So I'm kind of hoping it's going to be a little bit of a sneaky bee. And even when I explain to people what it does, I feel like it's going to be one of those units that it doesn't quite register until the enemy has actually felt its wrath. And finally, we get to what is strangely the smallest tank in the army. It is the Rogal Dawn. Normally, this thing is the largest tank, and I take one of these and support it with 3 or 4 Lehman Russes. But today, it will be fulfilling the role of light vehicle? No, of course not. It's still very, very durable. Toughness 12, 18 wounds, 2-up save, a belated plating to just blank 1 of the damage, and it is covered in guns. We've got the 3 stubbers, we have got the castigated Gatling cannon, the coaxial autocannon, the heavy bolters, and naturally, sir, we have got an oppressor cannon on there. Frankly, the Rogal Dawn is here to act as the same capacity as the super heavies. It's a big tank, it's got a lot of guns, and I expect it to be able to do quite a lot of damage. Interestingly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Rogal Dawn is one of the first tanks to go down most times. You would think that maybe the firepower would be drawn onto these two, but I suspect that a lot of players are going to see these 2 tanks and go, oh, they're probably a bit too big for me to deal with. And when something like Bring It Down or some other secondary pops up, they might end up going for the Dawn instead. But perhaps it will fly under the radar. The purpose of this tank is twofold. Firstly, it's to round out the armored core. I think if you're going to take a list that's got lots of big tanks, I think you need at least 3. So having those 3 tanks should help give me a degree of heavy armor saturation. And secondly, it's very similar in its capacity to the Shadow Sword. It's mostly focused on just doing damage to the enemy. And that's really all I need from it. The third sort of tertiary thing that I could get from it is if the enemy does end up shooting at that because they think it's an easier kill, hopefully it'll catch them off guard with how naturally tanky these things can be. And also, realistically, every anti-tank shot that's going into the Dawn is one that isn't going into the two big boys. And I really think that these two tanks, they're going to be the thing that win me the game. It might sound obvious, right? Because, well, they're the biggest things in the army. But you tend to find that it's, a lot of the time, not necessarily the damage dealers that win your games. It's more the stuff that's running around, sneaking, doing objectives. But I think in this case, there's so much invested, 1,000 points basically in these two vehicles here, that they're going to be doing so much damage. They're going to be running around causing such a nuisance for my opponent that hopefully these are going to win me the game. And so anything that allows them to do that job, to be the main force of the army and to draw firepower away from them, is going to be doing a very, very vital task indeed. But despite the natural power inherent in these armored units, they really do need some order support to make them sing. And this is where our next three units come in. We've got the Lord Solar, and this is Lord Solar on the Mordimobile. This is a custom-built Lord Solar model that was actually built by a member of the community, Cosmic Drew, and it's the exact right size and dimensions and proportions as the regular Lord Solar, and it's made completely out of GW parts, so it is technically tournament legal, and it has been completely approved for the tournament that I am going to. So this is a custom Lord Solar sent in by Cosmic Drew. Big thank you to him. It's one of my favorite models of all time. You've literally just got an officer on the back of what is the 40k equivalent of the Popemobile. And it truly is one of my favorite models of all time, and definitely one of my favorite ones sent in by the community. Now, he will be combining with a platoon command squad with the usual accoutrement. You've got the flag and the medic and the melter gun and a trumpet guy that's going to act as a voxcaster. And then we've got platoon commander Arantanak there with his power fist. And those two units will become leaders of this 10-man unit of Catachans. And combined, they will form what I like to call the Supreme Command Blob. Now, what all of this basically allows me to do is have the Lord Solar use the Master Vox of the Platoon Command Squad so that he can do his 3 orders 24 inches away. This allows him to sit behind a ruin or some landslide blocking terrain, or just behind the bulk of the Baneblade, frankly, and be able to order to units all around the board. So it means I don't have to cram all of my super heavies into a small 6-inch radius around the Supreme Commander. Instead, they can spread out one in the middle, one on each flank, and they can all receive order goodness. And this means that all of these vehicles, when they're moving around, will more than likely be receiving take aim. And that will mean they're all going to be hitting on 3s. And that's going to give them a very, very nice damage boost. And you might say, oh, I don't think they need it more. They do, trust me. With all of the shenanigans that 40k has, with people being able to reduce your ballistic skill or some other sort of shenanigans, it's just better to make sure that your big units get those shots laid down onto the enemy, laying the smackdown, as it were, and hitting on 3s. Well, it just makes all the difference. Any veteran guard commander will tell you that hitting on 3s and hitting on 4s is the difference between night and day. So that's their main function, to be able to provide take aim support to these vehicles. But speaking of supporting the vehicles, we've also got 2 Tech Priest engines. It's classic metal one and the newer plastic one. These guys are here to put 4+ invulnerable saves on the Baneblades. Straight up. No messing around. It will take these vehicles from difficult to kill to just downright impossible. 4+ invulnerable save plus 24 wounds, plus the fact that you can smoke them, plus the fact that you can also rely upon that toughness 13. just means that very little is going to get through. And so hopefully anything that does get through can also be repaired by the fact that these guys also do D3 wounds healed on vehicles each turn. So both of these Baneblades should be pretty durable. And if one of them does go down, I've still got a good target for their Omnicide Blessing with the old Dawn as well. So a little bit more support there, just making things a bit tougher. Whilst we're over this part of the list, it would be remiss not to mention the 5-man Scion squad that we've got. We have got 2 guys with rifles, 1 Scion with a plasma gun, 1 Scion with a melter gun, and then they are led by then Tempesta Prime. Now you might think, Morning, this looks like a bit like a Commissar model. Well, this is actually Commissar Tex, representing one of our community members today. He is a pupil of the Scholar Progenium, a Commissar in training, and he's leading his first mission, and he might as well do it with some Scion bodyguards. So that's the whole thing. They're all Scholar Progenium buddies together. Now, the job for these guys is to drop down, score points like behind enemy lines, deploy teleport home, and all that kind of good stuff. Very cheap, 55 points, and just unlocks a whole lot of secondary objective potential. Next up, we have our Catachan Combat Blob. One of my favorite units in Imperial Guard right now. You take a 20-man blob of Catachans, you give them 4 flamers, and you add on Colonel Ironhand Strachan. This guy's an absolute beast. He has taken down everything from Chaos Knights to Deathwing Terminators, and of course, many smaller, feebler, weedier foes than that. What this blob is going to do is very simple. It's giving me 20 bodies. It's giving me a good source for reinforcements if I ever want to play that stratagem. And it actually gives me some half-decent combat potential. You might think you'd be able to run people over with tanks, but annoyingly, it's not very effective. So having this block of infantry gives me at least a semblance of bodies and gives me a surprising amount of combat punch. And last, but certainly not least, we have a couple of experimental units, something which I've been theory crafting with for a while now, trying out, but finally I think it's time for them to hit the tournament scene. It is our Ogryn Fake Taxis. A little bit of a rude name for them, and I'm sure some people will be chuckling to themselves if they get the reference. It's a reference to some internet research, shall we say, gentlemen. Men of culture will certainly get that one. But moving on quickly, before YouTube demonetizes me for talking about inappropriate things, we've got 2 squads of Ogryn inside 2 Chimeras. Now, the point of these units is to act as Dakka tanks, to be able to clear light infantry and also bit of Ogryn shock trooper goodness. Like the Catachans, it gives me an element of close combat, but these guys don't need to get into combat to still be helping out. You see, if you take a unit of Ogryn and you put them inside a Chimera, 2 of those Ogryn can fire out the top. That means that you've got the 2 heavy bolters from here, but within 9-inch range, each one of these Ogryns is putting out 6 shots each. So from one Chimera, you'd have 6 heavy bolter shots and 12 pseudo heavy bolter shots, because those Ripper guns have basically got the same profile. Now they all hit on 4s because they get to use the Ogryn's ballistic skill, and to be fair, actually the Chimera's ballistic skill, and to be fair, Ogryn's hit on ballistic skill 4+ anyway. But if some of these tanks start going down and the Lord Solar needs a good target, a good tertiary target for his orders, having what is the equivalent of 18 heavy bolter shots, 6 heavy stubber shots, and 12 lasgun shots come out of one of these vehicles, hitting on 3s, well, that's actually really, really quite a respectable amount of firepower. And even if the Chimera goes down, what's interesting is the Chimera goes down, the Ogryn jump out, because they don't die on 1s anymore, they just take some mortal wounds, they shouldn't lose anyone. And what happens is the Ogryn jump out, and they still get to fire the 18 big shots, because now you've got a 3rd Ogryn who's basically taking over from those 2 heavy bolters. So it provides you with some speedy, close-range Dakka firepower, the strength of which is still just enough to be viable against some light armor as well. And if you need to push someone off an objective, these units are going to do it much more effectively than, say, 10 infantry inside a Chimera. Because those 10 infantry, sure, they've got the objective secured, or objective control, I should say, by 10th edition standards, but they don't have any real damage output. So the plan is that these guys are going to drive around, hosing people down, and then when the opportunity presents itself, jump out and start giving people a point-blank volley, then charging in, finishing them off, and hopefully clearing an objective. They're quite multi-role. They're a little bit objective play, and they're also obviously good damage dealers. And naturally, if I need to do an objective like investigate signals or get someone into a certain table quarter, having a fast-moving asset like a Rhino, which I don't mind if it doesn't have to fire for a turn, it's not the end of the world, that's pretty good as well. So again, fairly tactical, fairly multi-role, and also quite a bit of fun as well. And there you have it, the full 2,000 point army list. I have to say, I am both nervous and excited to be running this army. It is completely different to anything that I've run before. Very elite, very little infantry. In fact, this is the least infantry that I've run in a competitive list, outside of taking a tank company for a bit of fun, sort of late 9th edition when Lima Spam was semi-viable. Apart from that, I always started with my 80 to 100 infantry. So having so few this time, it's going to be a challenge, but it's one that I look forward to. Now, the overall strategy when it comes to the big picture with this thing is to use my list to achieve very rapid local domination. So what I want to do is focus on one objective and utterly obliterate my opponent's forces that are going for that. Do that in the first turn or two. And then in the second half of the game, take another objective in no man's land and then completely dominate that one. What I'm hoping this will allow me to do is to, as you should do with an elite list, exercise great force concentration. And so my opponent might end up with the third objective in no man's land relatively unmolested. I might not even fight them for it. But I'm happy to let them have that one and their home one if it means I get to control the other three. So the overall plan is to just utterly dominate into one area at once and then use that to just completely control the majority of the objectives for the majority of the game. But that's like my opinion, man. Who knows if that plan will survive contact with the enemy? Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Do you think that this list will be able to roll forward and crush the enemies of the Imperium? Or do you think that it's just too much of a meme? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you to Bon Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, August Vardy, and the Tommies. Thank you guys. Your incredible support makes a huge difference, and it is a big part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time. But that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.